All right, let's dive in. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, most confusing financial institutions in the world, the Federal Reserve. You hear about it in the news all the time, right? Interest rates are going up, or maybe the economy is cooling down. But have you ever stopped to think, who is actually making these huge decisions? Well, a huge part of that answer is the Federal Reserve. So, on paper, the Fed is the central bank of the United States. Its job is to keep our financial system safe and stable. But that official mission statement, it really doesn't capture the whole picture. To get why it's so powerful today, we've got to go back to a time when our financial system was, well, anything but stable. Yeah, the Fed wasn't just some idea somebody cooked up on a whim. Nope, it was born out of total chaos, really forged in the fire of some pretty intense financial meltdowns. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around now. But for a long time, the US was this massive economic powerhouse with basically no safety net. Think about it. All the other major countries had central banks to manage their money. But the US financial system was like a ship in a hurricane with nobody at the wheel. It just led to one panic after another, bank failures, and all kinds of economic damage. Everything really came to a head in 1907 with this absolutely brutal financial crisis. The panic got so bad that lawmakers finally said, okay, enough is enough. Something has to change. So after years of arguing and debating, it finally happened. On December 23, 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law, and the institution we know today was born. So what exactly did they create to tame all that chaos? The Fed's structure is, well, it's fascinating. It's this unique hybrid thing, kind of a government agency, but also kind of a private institution. Let's take a look inside. Everything really starts with this number 7. Because right at the very top, you've got a 7-member board of governors based in Washington, D.C. You can think of them as the central nervous system for the entire Federal Reserve. These are the 7 people running the show. They're nominated by the president and then have to be confirmed by the Senate. And here's the interesting part. To keep them away from short-term political pressure, they serve these long, staggered 14-year terms. The whole idea is that the board should represent a real cross-section of America's economy. Finance, agriculture, industry, all of it. But those 7 governors in D.C., they don't just operate in a bubble. The Fed's real boots-on-the-ground reach comes from this next number, 12. We're talking about the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks that are spread out all across the country. Each one of these banks is like a hub for its own geographic district, and they really act as the Fed's arms and legs. They're actually set up like private corporations, and their job is to keep an eye on the commercial banks in their area. They're basically the bank for banks. Okay, this is a really crucial point, so lean in. The Federal Reserve System, or FRS, is the whole shebang we just talked about. The board, the 12 banks, all of it. But when you hear on the news that the Fed is raising or lowering interest rates, they're actually talking about a specific group inside the Fed, the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC. This committee is the one with its hands on all the policy levers. So we get this structure now, but what's the mission? What's the end goal of all these governors and regional banks and committee meetings? What is the Fed actually trying to do? This right here, this is it. This is the Fed's famous dual mandate. It's all about a balancing act. On one hand, they have to keep prices stable, which really means keeping inflation in check. And on the other hand, they have to make sure as many people as possible have jobs. Almost every single decision they make is aimed at hitting these 2 goals. And to pull off that dual mandate, the Fed basically juggles 4 main jobs. First, the one we all hear about, is setting monetary policy. That's all the interest rate stuff. Second, it acts as a watchdog, supervising and regulating the nation's banks. Third, it's always on the lookout for big risks to the system, trying to prevent another financial meltdown. And fourth, it provides banking services to the U.S. government and other banks. So this brings us to one of the biggest, most debated questions about the Fed. I mean, it's part of the government, but it's not like any other agency. So what's the real deal? Is it actually independent? The best way to think about it is that the Fed is independent within the government. So its big policy decisions don't need a green light from the president or from Congress. And that's on purpose, right? To protect it from short-term political games. But it's not totally rogue either. The Fed is ultimately accountable to Congress, its leaders are appointed by the president, and it has to operate within the government's bigger economic goals. It's a tricky balance. Okay, so we've done the history, the structure, the duties, but let's bring this all home. Why should you care about any of this?
Well, the answer is that the Fed's decisions don't just stay on Wall Street. They make their way right down to Main Street.
Seriously? When the Fed changes interest rates, it changes the cost of borrowing money for literally everyone. That means the rate on your credit card, your mortgage, that car loan you're thinking about, even student loans. You can trace all of that back to a decision made by the FOMC. And their actions also influence whether businesses expand and hire, which, directly impacts the job market.
So let's just boil it all down. The Fed, it was born from crisis to bring stability. It's built on this really unique public-private structure. Its entire mission is a constant balancing act between keeping prices stable and getting people jobs. And it walks this super fine line between being independent from politics while still being accountable to the government.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. The Federal Reserve has this immense power to shape the economic lives of hundreds of millions of people. So the question we're left with isn't just what the Fed is, but how it chooses to use that incredible responsibility.